Well, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. You wouldn't believe some of the messes I have to clean up here after some groups. Strange ones. I rent this place out, mostly for bar mitzvahs and parties and suppers. It's a great location. High above the street, away from the smells. It's a good rental property, and it pays to advertise. Low maintenance. It's a great place. So this guy, John, comes up to me and asks if I have a room for the Passover. He said he'd like to celebrate Passover with a group of friends. Now, that's not your typical family group that I usually get, but just a group he's been hanging around with, I guess. Like a club, maybe. Like the Kiwanis. So I say to John, sure, I've got a room, but it'll cost you. And he says, that's fine. How much? And I tell him, and he says, that's fair. But you gotta put down a deposit, I tell him. You wouldn't believe some of the damage I've had done up here. Well, he just looked at me and smiled and said, oh, there'd be no damage. Sure, that's what they all say. But you know, I believed him. I didn't ask for a deposit. Had to lie to my accountant. She'd have screamed her head off. Thinks I'm a soft touch. You know, the group arrived just before sundown. Scraggly looking group. Weird, but peaceful, I guess. You know, when they arrived, they didn't have any servants. Now, in the first place, you can't do a banquet without servants. Now, I got servants you can rent. And I told them. But they said, oh, they didn't need any servants. Well, how can you do a party without servants? I mean, let me ask you this. Who's going to wash the feet of the guests? That's custom. The servant washes the feet of the guests. But when they walked in, the head guy, oh, the guy with the eyes. Man, you should have seen those eyes. The head guy takes off his cloak, picks up a wash basin, and he begins to wash the feet of the other guests. I couldn't believe it. I asked myself, what's this guy, the boss, doing all the work? And I tell you, this must have embarrassed the others because they started to say, oh no, it should be us who are washing your feet. They didn't know what to do with this. But you know what? That guy with the eyes, he just smiled and went on to the next set of feet. Now, my wife is a great caterer. Got her Class 1 license. Anything you want, Naomi can whip up. Half a cow, she's won prizes for her veal Jerusalem. Chickens, lamb, anything but pork. We don't move a lot of pork here at Passover. But these guys, this group, they didn't need a caterer. They brought their own food. Imagine that. Bread, wine, a little bit of fruit. I popped my head in a few times, and they asked me to come join them for supper, but with all my guests in town for the holiday, it's a busy season, and I couldn't do that. But, you know, I'd seen some of those guys around. Now, I'm terrible with names, but the head guy, the guy with the eyes, he sat about right here. And then John, who'd arranged for the room, he was next to him. Those others I'd seen around, let's see, there were a few fishermen, an accountant, a tent maker, a tax collector. Yeah, I remember him. And there was one guy who made me nervous. Simon, yeah, troublemaker, not a friend of the Romans. I'm surprised he was even out of jail. But like I said, they were a peaceful group, quiet. After dinner, the guy with the eyes, wish I could remember his name, a Nazarene. Well, he stood up and he started to talk. And they all got real quiet as they listened. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. I was actually listening outside of the door. Hey, it's my place. I got a right to know what's going on. Is that such a sin? So the guy stands up, the guy with the eyes, and he starts talking. I wrote it down what he said. I confess, it's my place, remember? He stands up and he says, I've really looked forward to eating this Passover supper with you before I start my suffering. Suffering. That's exactly what he said. I don't think they knew what he was talking about. But I won't eat it until it has come true in the kingdom of God. Well, tell you the truth, he started to lose me there. But it gets even stranger because then he took the cup and he lifted it and he said, take this and drink it. And every time you do, remember me. I won't drink it until the kingdom of God comes. By the way, I peeked in, okay? Remember, it's my place. And then he picked up the loaf. He raised that loaf up and he said, this is my body, which I'm going to give to you. When you do this again, remember me and what I said tonight. You know, I've rented this place to some pretty strange groups over the years, yeah. I've had weddings that go on for days. But these guys, this group, this man with the eyes, this Nazarene, seems real hot right now. You know what? They were different. Because then after that, he picked up the cup again and he said, this is the new deal, friends. This wine is my blood, a new contract just for you. I'm not kidding. He said the wine was his blood. And to make all this work, to make everything complete, one of you is going to betray me. Well, for a minute there, you could have heard a pin drop. There was silence in that room. They had no idea, I think, what he was talking about. But then they started arguing. They started saying, I would never be the one to betray you. Well, I guess the accountant just got tired of that because he just up and left. But then it got even noisier. They started arguing about who among them would be the greatest. And that's when he stopped them cold. He looked them in the eyes, those piercing eyes of his, and he said, the greatest will be the least. The biggest will be the smallest. He looked at them and he said, if you want to be the leader, you must be the servant. And as I look around here tonight, he said, the only servant I see is myself. Whew. Silence. So quiet up here. And you know what? Sometimes groups get quiet. I tell you, they do. But that's because they're drunk. These guys? No. These guys were quiet because they had just been put in their place. They left about an hour ago. Small place, just outside of the city walls next to Mount Olive. Gethsemane. Said they were going to spend the night there. They all thanked me as they left, and John, the guy who'd arranged for the room, he paid me, even a little extra. And then that one, the one with the eyes, he was the last to leave. He came up to me, and he asked me what I thought of what I'd heard tonight. I said, who do you think I am, someone who eavesdrops on people? He looked at me, and it was one of those looks that you know you can't lie your way out of. He looked at me and said, yes. What was I supposed to do? I just stood there. I just stared. And he stared back. And then he smiled. He smiled, and I started to cry. I don't know why, but I'll tell you this, the tears would not stop. It was as if someone had looked inside my heart and seen everything about me and loved me anyway. And I don't drink, not much anyway. I stood there stone sober, blubbering like a little baby. And I don't know why. On the other hand, I do know. I know why. I know it's because somebody saw me and showed me, I'll just say it, love. Love that I have never felt in my entire life. And I cried. He turned to go, and then he stopped. He turned back to me, but by this time I was almost afraid to look into those eyes again. But I did. And he smiled at me. But he was crying for me. I've got to get this place cleaned up.
Man, he's gonna be in trouble. I mean, if I pulled something like that, I'd have gotten whipped good. And his parents are strict too. And then what he said to them when he got caught, man. See, we were all in town for Passover. It was really wild. Like a big party that goes on for days. I mean, we do synagogue stuff too, but mainly it's just a lot of fun. So, me and my friends were running around while the adults were doing, I don't know, Passover business. And suddenly, he was just gone. I never saw him leave, honest. Me and Joseph were running around, watching the guy with the trained doves. And when I looked over and said, "Hey, Jesus, did you see that?" And he wasn't there. Mary and Joseph didn't know where he was, but they knew he was running with me. So my parents sat me down and started the third degree. Where were you? But by the doves. When did you lose him? I didn't lose him. Did he say where he was going? I didn't even know he was gone. For about an hour. Heck, if I'd have known anything, I'd have told them. He was my buddy. We did everything together. We played together ever since they came from Egypt. We even took instruction at the synagogue together. Why would I want to lose somebody like that on purpose? Hey, we're just 12 years old. And the thing is, when you go to Passover, you go in really big groups of people, like a couple hundred. You all go together, and you all come back together. And when we all met to go back together, they thought Jesus was with me. And I thought Jesus was with them. And well, it was just a mess. We've been on the road for about a day when they realized Jesus was missing, and they all stopped dead and looked at me. Mary and Joseph were worried sick, and they went running back to Jerusalem. The whole caravan followed. I was really worried too. 3 days. We looked all over Jerusalem for 3 days. All the time, them asking me if I was sure I hadn't seen Jesus run off anywhere. My dad made sure I traced over every single step me and Jesus took. Well, I didn't exactly tell him every step. But most of them. Just on the night of the third day, we all heard Mary shouting across the street, "Joseph, Joseph, he's here!" It turns out that he was at the temple the whole time. with all the old, important people. Me and my dad got there right as Joseph was running up, and he hugged him real quick and put him down and said, "Jesus, where have you been?" And Mary followed up with, "Don't you know how worried we've been?" And Jesus just looked up at him with those big eyes of his and said, "What's got you so worried? I got to do my dad's work." Mary and Joseph just looked at Jesus, and Jesus just looked at them, and my dad just looked at me, and I said, "I don't got a clue what he's talking about." It was clear Mary and Joseph didn't have a clue either. But here's where it gets really weird. They just said, "Okay, let's go home." Just that. "Okay, let's go home." The thing is, when I get in really, really big trouble, I don't always get punished there. They wait till we get home. Jesus is at home now, and I bet he's getting it good. And if he gets out of this, he better tell me how he did it.
It's not like the death in a family or something. I mean, they're still alive, and I hope they're okay. But when you lose a neighbor, a really good one, I don't know, there's a hole, don't you think? It's been almost a week now, and every time I look out my kitchen window, I expect to see him walking to work, and sometimes she'd wave at me from her window. There have been about a dozen families that have been by to look at the house this week, and every time I want to stick my head out the window and shout, "Don't buy it, they might come back." But I doubt that. Good ones never do. I guess it's not like this was really ever their home. I remember the day they came to town. And the donkey. You must admit that was odd. Most Egyptians rely on camels in this weather. And here they came riding into town on a donkey. Joseph looking like he had walked every step of those 300 miles, and Mary on the donkey holding a baby. It was a cute sight. I didn't see them at first. My neighbor came running over asking if I could speak any Hebrew. My dad had traveled a lot for Pharaoh, and so I had picked up a few words here and there, but I found out the only 2 words I really needed were hungry and sleep. That got us by for the first few days until the house next door was ready. But their little one, Jesus, he picked up Egyptian right along with his parents' Hebrew. Mary said it was embarrassing to have to ask the 2-year-old what the Egyptian word for oil was when she'd go shopping. I wish they were still here. Right there is where Jesus would play in the mornings while Mary was doing her washing. It's a good neighborhood. We could do that sort of thing. She'd leave Jesus with my kids, and they would take care of him like he was one of their own. Last night, Misha was crying. I went to her, and she said she missed her little friend. He was just a year old when they had arrived and had just turned 2 when they left? My husband told me, he said, "Don't get too attached. They're just here for a short stay until things in Nazareth settle down." I don't know the whole story, but we get the news. Mass murder of innocent babies, all of them. I can't imagine. Herod. One night, I asked Mary how they knew they needed to leave. I'm not sure she trusted me, the whole Hebrew God thing. They were scared every day they lived in Egypt. Their accents gave them away, and even though we have many foreigners in our country these days, it must have been frightening, especially with the baby. But she told me that Joseph had a dream, and an angel told them to leave that night, quick. So at 3 a.m, they picked up everything they could carry, and they followed the caravan routes to Egypt, 300 miles. I can't imagine. Fear makes you do things you can't imagine. And the cost? Mary said Jesus was given some wonderful gifts by visitors shortly after he was born. I think they may have sold those to make the trip. Don't get too attached to neighbors, he told me. How can you not get too attached to such special people? How can you not fall in love with such a wonderful little family? In fact, one night Joseph was sick and my kids were gone and Mary needed help with Jesus. So I asked my husband if he could watch him for a few hours. I wish you could have seen what happened next. Oh, he's good with kids. He's just sort of stupid sometimes. He thinks they're just short adults. I was in the other room working on something, and I heard him talking to Jesus about how the Nile River might flood this year and the price of grain along the Delta. Remember, Jesus was just 2 years old. But then it got quiet. My husband stopped talking, so I went in to check if everything was all right. They were sitting on the floor, and Jesus was on his knee, and they were staring at each other. I finally asked, "Everything all right in there?" But they didn't move. Finally, my husband said, "Look at him. Look at his eyes, Reba. Look at the way he's looking at me. It's like he can see something." They were gone just as quickly as they came. One morning, they came to our door and thanked us for our love and for our friendship, and they were off, back to Israel. I miss them. I miss them very much.
You think you've had long days. Listen, Papuska, you don't even know what a long day is. Such a day I've had. You want to hear? I tell you, I was sick. Not your normal runny nose, sneezing, headache sick. No, I'm talking fever sick. You could roast a bagel on my skull. They had to move the bed sheets away so I wouldn't cause a fire sick. I was delirious, out of my mind sick. My son-in-law walked in and I thought he was a camel. Don't you laugh until you as sick as I was. And this day he invited guests over. His mother-in-law setting the sheets ablaze in the back room and he starts a party. 12 guests and me in the back room mumbling about pomegranates and stuffing a pillow in my mouth. Well, I thought it was manna. Then I heard his voice. This Jesus. Well, to tell you the truth, I've always admired the man and the things he was doing, but so my son-in-law got involved in, well, then I just became afraid for the boy. Seems like too much attention is not a good thing, and, well, this Jesus gets a good deal of attention. I heard him say, "Quiet, my mother-in-law's sick." "Oh, so good of you to notice, Simon. I'm dying in the back room while you're drinking wine with your friends, and you think to mention that I might be dying. Such a good son-in-law." Then I heard this Jesus. He said, "Where is she?" Simon said, "She's in the back room." And he said, "Take me to her." Well, like I needed that. I have my pride, you know. I'm not dressed for gas, Golda, And before I could stop them, like I really could stop them, there they were. Simon behind Jesus saying, she has a fever. The boy's a genius. I'm lying there drowning in a pool of my own sweat, and he guesses I have a fever. So good of him to notice. Then it happened. He reached down and touched his finger to my forehead, and I was mumbling something about manna tasting like feathers, and then he put his whole hand on my brow, and I couldn't move. It was like a cool water washed over me from head to toe, and it was like a light had filled the room, and my eyes cleared, and I could see his face. He was looking at me. Those eyes. So I got up. I started fixing supper. I kid you not, I started baking bread for the whole bunch of them. What can I say? I'm a Jewish mother. You're hungry, I'm going to cook. And then word got around that a miracle had happened in our back room, and here they come. Every demon-possessed and crippled man, woman, and child in town were at our back door, and he stood there, laying his hands and driving out the demons. Don't look at me like that. I know what I saw. Some of them were out of their minds, and he cured them. All of them. And nothing works up a good hunger like being rid of a demon. So I started baking bread at 2:00 today. You think you've had a long day? Let me tell you what a long day is.
I get in trouble. I mean, a lot. I used to get in trouble just a little bit when I was younger, but now that I'm older, my getting in trouble has gotten a little bit bigger. Mom says I don't even act like a girl sometimes. She says, why can't you be more like your older brother? And I say, because he's a boy and boys are always perfect. Well, at least he seems to think that he is. And you see, I got this problem. I have to be first. And I don't know why, but it really bothers me when someone gets in line ahead of me. Whenever we go for meals in synagogue, I have to be first in line. And whenever we come back from tour class, I've got to be first in the door. I mean, it's just this thing I got, okay? I mean, I just can't help it. Mama says I was even born 3 weeks early because I was afraid someone else was going to beat me to it. But anyways, we were in Judea last week visiting my cousins, and Mama woke me up and said, hey, Esther, there's a rabbi speaking out on the edge of the city today. Want to go? And I was like, oh yeah, Mama. I spend 5 days a week listening to rabbis in Hebrew school and my whole Saturday morning listening to rabbis in synagogue. And this is my one day off. Gee, I'd love to go listen to another rabbi. But have you ever said no to your mom? And I mean, lived to tell the tale about it. So, of course I went. And, of course, I was first. I was first to get ready, first to run out to the hillside, and first to start a game of tag while all the adults listened to the rabbi. And I saw him sitting there when we arrived. And he wasn't all old and wrinkled like Rabbi Mishua or all bent over like Rabbi Mandoff. He was a lot younger and did something really weird for a rabbi. He smiled. And then the Pharisees came. Man, those guys ruined everything. He quit smiling when he saw that they had arrived. And then they started asking questions about divorce and a bunch of other boring stuff. And the more he answered their questions, the madder they got. I don't even think they really wanted answers. They just wanted to trick him. And then, after a while, he got tired of all of this. And he looked over their heads to where we were standing, and he yelled, "Hey, anybody want healed?" Or something like that. I forget the exact words. Blessed. He said, "Come and be blessed." And I wasn't exactly sure what blessed meant, but I saw a line starting to form, and well, you know me. And soon enough, all my friends were lined up behind me. And then his friends, the young rabbi's friends, they stepped right in and blocked us off. Then I ran straight to the big one in front. And then the rabbi, "You're not going to believe this." He said, hold it. Let those kids come to me. This is just like the kingdom of God." And I mean, it's one thing to argue with a rabbi, but are you really going to argue with God? I know they didn't. They let us come right on through. And guess who was first? And I knew Mama was somewhere back there having a fit of embarrassment, but like I said, I saw a line for me, and well, you know me. And then there I was, face to face with the young rabbi, and he had the prettiest eyes you'd ever seen, and I'm not kidding. It was like they were, magic or something. And then he asked me my name, and I told him, and he asked if I'd like to be blessed. And I hadn't been blessed before that I can remember, but I was going to be darned if I was going to let someone get blessed ahead of me. So I said, heck yes. And he did. He put his hands on my head and said, "Father, I give this child to your keeping. Don't take your eyes off of her." And well, I guess you could say he knew me pretty well because I always needed watching. And it was cool. And now I can say I've been blessed before. How about you? Oh shoot, I think I see a line forming over there. I don't know what it's for, but I've got to be first. See ya.
Oh, would you look at this? Would you look at this mess? Ugh. Who's gonna clean this up? And who's gonna pay me for it? Yeah, so here comes this terrorist or whatever, just as the crowds were getting big on Temple Day. I had my stand set up. I had a big collection of product today. Doves, a couple sheep, a ram, and then here comes this wild-eyed madman just turning over the tables, letting the birds loose. Oh, and that whip. He actually had a whip, slapping at us like we were goats or something and shouting, "Get out of here! How dare you turn my father's house into a market?" Oh, well, I said, "Hey, fella, this is a market. This is where people come to buy their sacrifices for the temple." Well, he turned his eyes on me and, well, I froze. It was scary. I mean, look what he was doing. I thought maybe he had a knife on him or something. No. He turned his eyes on me and he said, You understand." Well, I didn't understand. Look, people travel for days to get to Passover. They don't want to carry a bunch of doves in their pockets. They don't want to drive a sheep for 80 miles when they could buy one right here. This is a service. The synagogue, it sells the licenses. I'm not breaking any law. He is. Then he ran over to the money changers and he kicked their tables right out from under them, money rolling all over the floor. And as the bankers are scrambling to pick up the cash, That's when he came out with the whip. Look, people travel for days to get to Passover. I mean, they don't want to do all this stuff, right? Yeah, see, when you come to Passover, you're required to sacrifice at least a lamb to God. I don't make those rules. God made that rule. But let's say you're from out of town, or you've got the wrong kind of currency. Yeah, the temple, it only takes certain currency, and that's why we have the money changers. This is a public service. You sacrifice, he blesses you. It's a simple equation. And so there we are, just trying to help people out. And then here comes this crazy man who thinks he's God or something. And well, just look at the mess. Well, then the priests, they heard the commotion and they come running out here and they see the birds flying through the air and the sheep running all over the place. And they see this guy and oh, you could tell they knew him. They see him and they shout, "What are you doing? Who gave you the authority to do this?" Well, he turned his eyes on them and he said, "You know." They acted like they knew, but I didn't. I said, "Hey, somebody let me in on the joke." Well, then they said to him, "Okay, do some big miracle to prove you have the authority." He was holding a pigeon, my pigeon, in his hand. He looked at it, and then he let it go. I couldn't catch it. It was my fastest pigeon. And then he said, get this, "Tear this temple down, and I will raise it again in 3 days." Yeah. Oh, that's just plain ridiculous. Yeah, this temple's not as fancy as the first one that used to be here, but I think it was a sort of trick. No one was going to tear down this temple, and he knew it. The guy behind me, he said, he's bluffing. So I looked him in the eyes, and, well, he wasn't bluffing. But I think it was a sort of trick. He wasn't talking about the temple at all. He was talking about something else entirely. Well, he's gone now, and I'm left with this. Would you just look at this mess?
I didn't see you folks. You with a tour or something? Oh, well, this is it. This place you're looking for. There ain't no big sign or nothing, but this is it. Seems like I spend most of my time giving folks directions up to this place. Yeah. You know, it's good you came here while you was alive, because after you're dead, it'd cost you a lot more. This fellow over here, he was a banker, a rich man. In fact, that's what he did with his first fortune, was bought himself this fancy tomb. He and his family used to picnic up here just so folks would know he could afford an expensive grave. Over here, now this is Petrus. Petrus was a big man in his time. Petrus was into camels. You wanted a camel, you went and saw Petrus. Now you want a camel, I reckon you go see somebody else, he's dead. Well, they're all dead. The ones that are still here. Me? Well, I'm the fellow that keeps this place looking nice. I'm the groundskeeper. These here are the grounds, and I'm the one that keeps them. I said, don't lie like they're going to go anywhere. That's a joke I like to tell the tourists sometimes. Say, hey, ain't I doing a good job? I'm the groundskeeper, and there they are. I try to tell folks about this place. Nobody believes me. I'm just the groundskeeper. Oh, but anyway, this is the one you're looking for right here. I don't know what the big deal is. It's the only tomb up here that's empty. Belonged to a fellow named Joseph. Joseph of someplace I can't pronounce, but he's dead now too. He bought himself a place over on the other side of the garden. He said it didn't seem right being buried in a used tomb. But y'all, this is it. Come on up. Nothing up here gonna hurt you. Nothing to be afraid of. Now, right there is where they laid the body, and that's where it ought to be right now. But it ain't. It's gone. You believe that story? I do. Well, at least I think I do. I was working that day. Well, I wasn't working that day, but I worked that morning and the day before. Joseph had hired some fellows to carry the body in here. And then the government put a round-the-clock guard on the thing. I don't know why they didn't just put up a big sign that said, hey, this guy scares us. And then 3 days later, that stone was moved and he was gone. My cousin knew one of the fellows that gardened it. He said he took off for Egypt. Don't you believe what you heard either. That dead guy did not move that stone. And no angel came and rolled it away for him to get out. No, sir. When that rock got moved, he was already gone. So, why move the stone? Well, it wasn't for him to get out, and that's for sure. So maybe they moved the stone so we could see in. Yeah, go ahead. Look in, look all you want. That's why they moved the stone. Who moved the stone? Well, lady, I ain't going there. I'll tell you what. Anybody can move a stone like that. Well, I ain't asking any questions. I can just say the stone got moved. That's all I need to know. Nobody moved that for him to get out. He was a Jew. In fact, most of these folks up here were Jews. You see, Jews won't bury each other inside the city limits unless they're a king or something. So they buried him up here with all the rich folks, all the dead rich folks. See, these things are expensive. You've got to carve them out. And I used to do that, and then I got a promotion, and now I tell other fellas things like, whoa, that's too wide, or don't forget to clean up that mess. Well, I mean, I reckon you can stick around. That's all there is to see here. You can stick around as long as you want. It ain't like there's going to be a show or nothing. Show's already done. In fact, the guy told me that. I came up here the day after it happened to see what all the commotion was about. And I was over peeking into the tomb. And this guy came up behind me and he said, the show's already done. There's no need to look here. And I turned around and looked into his face. You would believe me. I'm just a groundskeeper.
Please take these stories as a gift from God, as we are all bystanders. Thank you for coming.